Hello and welcome back to part 2 of my thoughts on the Beatles White Album 50th Anniversary Deluxe Edition box set. And on this one I'll be talking about the Esher demos, which is disc 3 and discs 4, 5, and 6, the sessions. Now I don't know if you guys are fans of the podcast Fab 4 Free For All. I see a lot of my longtime subscribers on their Facebook group. And I think back in early October, they had a deal in New York where Giles Martin was there and playing tracks, kind of a discussion of what's coming up. And it was either Tony Tiguardo or Rob Leonard who said, if you have any of the bootlegs of the Esher demos, if you have your bootlegs, put them on eBay now. Because come November 9th, they are going to lose their value. Finally, officially released the complete Esher demos, and they've been remixed, renovated, restored. It sounds like you are in George's living room with George, Paul, and John, hanging out with them with acoustic guitars, maybe having a cheese and Marmite sandwich. For those that don't know, prior to the official recording of the White Album, both John, Paul, and George got together at George's house. I think he had a 4-track machine, and they demoed quite a bit. There were how many demos? There were 22 demos. And a lot of them were double-tracked, and they each demoed a number of songs that were going to be on the White Album, and a number that the Beatles didn't do. A couple that the Beatles didn't do. But a number of them were on the White Album. And it's basically acoustic Beatles. Acoustic John, acoustic Paul, acoustic George. The songs are rough. They're beautiful in their raw form. I mean, a couple of highlights for me on the Esher demos. And I've had a bootleg of this. I had a bootleg of it on cassette. A friend of mine had the bootleg on CD. Taped it for me on cassette in the 90s. And that cassette has since been lost, unfortunately. And you heard a number of these, not all of them, but you heard like maybe 9 of these on Anthology 3. But some of the highlights for me, Your Blues, in its raw form, just acoustic. It's got a nice rootsy country feel to it. And George's Piggies, which you heard on Anthology 3, that version was always a favorite of mine, with a lyric that was actually altered at one point. Paul's Back in the USSR, the way he does it there, acoustic, where he's forming the guitar solo with his mouth. So he's humming the guitar solo, what would eventually become the guitar solo for Back in the USSR. That is good. A couple of the unreleased songs that they didn't do for the White Album. John's Child of Nature, which a few years from now would become Jealous Guy on Imagine. I first heard that on the Lost Lennon tapes. Remember that show? Lost Lennon tapes? And I liked it then. I mean, Jealous Guy is obviously a better song, but it's interesting to see how sometimes it takes a while to develop things. Obviously, he put it on the shelf, and it was ready to be born anew for the Imagine album as Jealous Guy. George's original demo version from Esher of Sour Milk Sea, a song that he gave to Jackie Lomax for his debut single for Apple and for the highlight of his only Apple album. If you've never heard the Jackie Lomax album, Is This What You Want?, you need to hear that album. But hearing George's demo of Sour Milk Sea, I kind of wish he had done it and kept it as a Beatle track, because that is really a good song. Circles, another one by George on an organ, which I think that was eventually redone for Gon Troppo, I believe. But the Esher demos is definitely a highlight. I'm glad they're out. I'm glad we have them. And it's true, if you have the bootlegs of those, you don't need those bootlegs anymore. Now we get to the Sessions discs. And I love the Sessions disc. I love what they did on the Sgt. Pepper box. I love it even more here. When I talk about the whole package on my final video of this, I'm going to talk about how they pulled back a lot of the years of bitterness. I think a lot of people's memory of the White Album within the Beatles is clouded by the bitterness that happened during the breakup. What I'm seeing here, especially in the session dialogue, yes, there were tensions. Revolution 1, take 18, which was the basis for the much bootlegged Take 20 that had a lot of weird overdubs to it, which you could find on YouTube and other places. I like the fact that they gave us things that you really can't find on the bootlegs. Take 18, I love in its raw form. I love in its raw form. A lot of the moaning and screaming that you hear John do is in Revolution number 9. But I like it in its stripped down form, and this shows for 10 minutes the Beatles could be the ultimate jam band. It's tuneful. My favorite part is when John finally, you hear John on the mic go, okay, I've had enough. Tensions in the studio? Yoko's there playing a tape recorder. Tensions in the studio. John had enough, but Paul, George, and Ringo, they haven't had enough. And they continue jamming. And Paul is freaking out on the piano as much as John was. He's singing Love Me Do. It is awesome. And then Ringo does a breakdown on the drums, and they keep going, and then he does this awesome fill, and they just kick the jam in a high gear. And then John goes over to a mellotron and starts playing mellotron flute. And then the whole last section of it is also the last section of Revolution 9. But they're having a great time on this. Good Night, Take 10. Another highlight for me. All three Beatles, John, Paul, and George, doing harmony behind Ringo on Good Night. It's not perfect harmony, but it's harmony. And for all of us who are Beatle fans, all of us who love these guys, all of us who are obsessed with this, hearing all four Beatles harmonize on Good Night, oh my gosh, I every time I play that version, I have tears in my eyes, and I'm almost like, can we go back and resequence the album and put that version of Good Night in place of the orchestral version? I love the orchestral version with Ringo and the choir, but this version, oh my gosh. There's so many highlights out here, so I'm just skimming over a lot of this stuff. So, Cry Baby Cry, the unnumbered rehearsal take. The Beatles sounding like Pink Floyd. John on an organ, doing this organ drone that reminds me of Rick Wright, and it's almost like Breathe in the Air from Dark Side of the Moon. It's like, it sounds just like a Pink Floyd tune. I love that version, this unnumbered rehearsal take. Now, Helter Skelter, first version, take 2. That's the 12-minute version. No, we didn't get the 27-minute version of Helter Skelter. But the 27-minute version of Helter Skelter is not what you would hear in the final version with the guitar feedback going and all that going on for 30 minutes. It's the same version as take 2. This slow, dirge, bluesy version. You heard take 2 edited to 4 minutes on Anthology 3. This is the complete take 2, which goes on for 12 minutes. I'm glad to have it. I'm glad to have it. It doesn't go anywhere, but I'm glad they released it, and I'm glad that we have it, because if they kept it in the vaults, I wouldn't like that. So I'm definitely glad that we have that. For those that want the 27-minute version of this, just play that twice. Sexy Sadie, take 3. We heard that on Anthology 3, but edited. Some of the takes that are on here we've heard on Anthology 3, but on Anthology 3 they were in such truncated versions that it's great to have the completed takes of these things. That's what I'm happy about. Not Guilty, the complete take 102. Now let me tell you, I'm one of those fans that complained about some of the things in the Anthology series. Not much, but there were a number of tracks that were used in the Anthology series that were completed for a compilation that was not released, that was set to come out in December of '84, and they shelved it. They shelved it because Paul felt it was going to come up against Give My Regards to Broad Street, and Yoko, George, and Ringo just didn't want it out. They didn't want it out at all. It was called Sessions. Jeff Emmerich was there to remix a lot of the tracks. A lot of the things from the whole Anthology series. Leave My Kitten Alone, How Do You Do It? If You Got Troubles, That Means a Lot. A lot of that stuff was remixed for the Sessions compilation, and when it just came time for the Anthology, they just took a lot of that off the shelf and cleaned it up and stuck it on the anthology series. Not Guilty was one of them. So Take 102 is on Anthology 3, but the Sessions edit, where Jeff Emmerich edited out the first guitar solo between verse 1 and verse 2, edited out the first line of verse 2, added a backwards echo effect to the main guitar solo, looped the ending so he could create a proper fade, and added an extremely unnecessary phasing effect to the whole track. This is the complete Take 102. I'm glad I hear the complete Take 102. And again, the Beatles are jamming at the end of this thing. They are jamming, and it just shows that maybe the Beatles could have been the ultimate jam band during this time. I could just imagine if they decided to go the route of playing Fillmore West or Fillmore East in either San Francisco or New York, how that could have been if the Beatles would have been on stage doing a Grateful Dead or an Allman Brothers. This shows, though, that they had the chops to be a damn good jam band. So, the Sessions discs, certain things of studio dialogue. Before a take of While My Guitar Gently Weeps with Eric Clapton, George Harrison announces, "I'll just have lettuce, cheese, and Marmite sandwich and coffee." Somehow George has got a product placement thing for Marmite. At the beginning of the backing vocals of Lady Madonna, which they have the backing vocal session of that, he's munching on crisps, and you hear him go to Ringo, "They should make Marmite flavored crisps." And Ringo says, "I don't like Marmite." I never had Marmite. I kind of want to try it now, even though certain people are telling me it's disgusting. But I like those touches. Now, some of the criticisms of the session set, I'll address that in the final part. But right now, I love these. I like the Elements mixes because I like hearing these backing tracks without the vocals. I know some people like the vocals, but just like Brian Wilson's Pet Sounds sessions with the Beach Boys, he did the backing tracks live without vocals there. So I don't know if the Beatles didn't add vocals to these, but I like hearing some of these elements that you hear in the backing track. And again, it highlights the fact that this was not all acrimony during this period. That somehow the acrimony may have been blown out of proportion. Who knows? The Esher demos and the Sessions discs, another great addition. You need this if you are a fan. You need to get those Sessions discs. This is a brilliant package. If you have the 4LP edition of this, you don't have the Sessions, this big box, you need the big box as well. You definitely need the big box as well. So, very happy with these Sessions discs and the Esher Demos discs. And thank you very much. Part 3, I'm going to be talking about the 5.1 surround mix. So, be ready for that. And y'all have a great day, and I hope you're enjoying your White Album box. Peace.